It seems like every conference is still relatively wide open. There are plenty of teams that have a shot of making a run at a conference title, not even the playoff. We're just talking conference title. I want to look at one team from each conference that can still make a run, kind of a sleeper team at a conference title, and look at what makes them so dangerous. We'll start with the American. ECU is the team that I don't think a lot of people want to face. Right now, you have a six-way tie at the top of the American with Navy, Memphis, North Texas, Tulane, USF, and ECU. ECU is a team that not a lot of people are talking about, even within the American circles. I think everybody has their focus on Memphis, North Texas, and then next would be the next year is Navy, Tulane, and USF. Not a lot of people are talking about ECU. This is an offense that can put up points in a hurry, an offense that can be explosive, and they are a problem for teams that they still have to face. Now, when it comes to making a run at the conference title, there are still some things that they can do in their favor. They still have to play Memphis. That helps. They have 4 more games left to be able to win. The other 3 are against Charlotte, UTSA, and FAU. Now, those final 3 games against Memphis, UTSA, and FAU, those are maybe your biggest concerns for this team. Are you able to pull off an upset against a Memphis? That's going to be the big question. If a team like UAB can beat Memphis, a team like ECU can definitely beat Memphis as well. So that is something to keep an eye on in this conference. Everybody's kind of talking about those handful of teams, but not a lot of people are talking about ECU, and that could make them potentially dangerous in the final stretch of the season. Then we go to the ACC. There are a couple teams that fit this category, but right now I think Duke is the most dangerous team in terms of a sleeper team. Duke is 4-1 in the conference. They're 5-3 overall. And one of the things we talked about this year was after the loss to Tulane, you had a loss to Illinois, and then the next game you lose to Tulane. There were things that happened in those games where Duke could have won those football games, but because they were making mental mistakes, the penalties, those kinds of things, the turnovers, there were things that they were doing that limited their success. And I talked about this after that game. I said Duke is a team that is very dangerous if they can figure it out and put it together. They have done that since that game. They beat NC State 45-33. They beat Syracuse 38-3. They beat Cal 45-21. They did lose to Georgia Tech 27-18. And then they just beat Clemson 46-45. So if there is a team that is capable of making a run, it's this Duke Blue Devils team. Manny Diaz deserves a lot of credit for what he's done with this group to be able to turn around, especially after starting out 1-2. Now, the remaining schedule, they have UConn, Virginia, which is a team that is also in the mix, North Carolina, and Wake Forest. So if there is a team that can make a run at the ACC title, Duke is definitely near the top of that list. And right now, you have Virginia is sitting at the top. They're undefeated in conference play. Georgia Tech, Pitt, Louisville, SMU, and these Blue Devils all have 1 loss. So they are still very much in the mix, and they have a favorable schedule for the remaining part of the year that could put them at the top and could get them into that conference title. If they're able to do that, this is a very dangerous team, and I would not want to face them if you're any of these teams that remain on their schedule. Now, there's still a little bit that has to happen for this to be a dangerous team, but the Big 12 is still relatively wide open. Now, BYU sits at the top, undefeated in conference play and overall. Texas Tech and Cincinnati have 1 loss. So Utah is a dangerous team, but they do need a little bit of a help. They need 2 of those teams to lose for them to have a chance. Now, they're still very much a really dangerous team in terms of they can probably beat any of those teams that we've seen. Yes, they do have the losses to BYU and Texas Tech, but when you look at those games, I think that there are things that could indicate they would be a much different team towards the end of the year. Now, the tough part is that you have to play Baylor, Kansas State, and Kansas still. So that is not a favorable schedule. But if they're able to navigate those with 3 wins and somehow find a way into the Big 12 championship, that is a scary team that I would not want to face, to be completely honest. Now, the Big 10, I did have 2 teams here just because they're big-time sleepers. One of them I'm not as worried about, but Iowa and USC are still very much in that conversation. Now, it's probably going to be Indiana and Ohio State, but for entertainment, let's just talk about it like this. They have a chance. They're both 4-1 in conference play. Now, again, Iowa is definitely more of a sleeper because nobody expects Iowa to make any sort of run. But USC is a team that I think has the firepower to be able to make some kind of a run and give some teams trouble. Now, we've seen them be inconsistent this year, but that's also what makes them a sleeper. People are not expecting them to make this type of a run. Now, the nice thing for USC, or the bad thing, is that they have to play Iowa and Oregon. So they're going to have opportunities to prove their worth, to prove that they belong. It's just that it's going to be challenging. You also have Northwestern and UCLA. Those are much more difficult tasks than I think people realize. But USC, if they're playing at their peak, they're a dangerous team. Whether or not they're actually going to make a run, I don't know. Again, it's probably going to be Indiana and Ohio State, but USC and Iowa are teams that are being slept on in the Big Ten, and it's kind of obvious to see why. But those are teams that I wouldn't be surprised if they surprise a lot of people in the Big Ten and be able to move on up. But again, it's probably a moot point at this point. Ohio State and Indiana are probably going to be the two teams that are playing for that conference championship. We'll go into Conference USA, and surprisingly, Kennesaw State and Jacksonville State are at the top right now. Both are undefeated in conference play, and I'm shocked, honestly. This is not what I expected. Now, one thing that we talked about coming into the year, I said that Missouri State was going to be a surprise in this conference, and so far they are that. They are sitting currently tied for technically third, even though they're 3-1 in conference play. Western Kentucky's 5-1, but Missouri State 3-1, only one conference loss, and kind of a surprise there. The Liberty Flames, this is a team that we came into the year expecting them to be a conference contender. They have been anything but that, but as of recently, they've played a little bit better, and they had a big performance against Delaware this past week, and I think that Liberty is still a team to keep an eye on for Conference USA. Still plenty of football left for all these teams to play, and Liberty and Missouri State are teams to keep an eye on in terms of sleeper teams that could get their way into the conference championship still. Then obviously we're not going to do independent, so we'll go to the MAC. The MAC is about what you expect. You have Miami of Ohio sitting at the top at 5-3 overall. You have plenty of teams that are still very much in this conversation. Western Michigan, though, is a dangerous team to keep an eye on. They're 4-1 in conference play, which puts them second in the conference with Buffalo. And this is still very much a wide open conference. Ohio's still in it. Buffalo's in it. Toledo technically isn't out of it. And technically, Ball State, Kent State have opportunities as well. I just don't trust them to make that kind of a run. But they are tied with Toledo right now in conference play. But Western Michigan, to me, is a team to keep an eye on. You could also put Ohio in that. I think that they're still very much a good football team that is capable of winning yet another MAC conference championship. But I'm going to go with Western Michigan as the sleeper team in the MAC. Going to the Mountain West. The Mountain West is a wide open race relatively. San Diego State sits at the top, and they look like the best team in the conference right now. Boise State's right behind them, with Fresno State and Hawaii behind them as well. But New Mexico is a team that is tough. They are playing really well under Jason Eck, and I think that this is a team that deserves more credit for what they have done. They just beat UNLV 40-35. They beat Utah State the week before 33-13. That is a team that is not being paid attention to enough, I don't think, and I think that they are very much still in that conversation to make a run at a conference title because teams continue to overlook them. We're going to skip the Pac-12. Obviously, Texas to me is a sleeper team in the SEC. Even though everybody's talking about them, if this team finds a way to win their final 3 games, I don't think that anybody is going to want to face them. Why? Because this offense is playing a little bit better. There are still plenty of questions, but this offense is playing better. And that was the question we had about this team for most of the year. Can the offense do its part? Because the defense has done its part time and time again, and they continue to play at that level. The thing is that Arch Manning appears to found his confidence. He is making the right reads, the right types of plays, and Steve Sarkisian is calling the offense around his team's strengths, and they found exactly what works for them. Now, they were the more talented team against Vanderbilt this past weekend, and that was very obvious. What can they do against a team like Georgia, where the talent level is even? What can they do that's in 2 weeks. After that, you play Arkansas and then you play Texas A&M. When you play Texas A&M, rivalry game, talent level is equal. Can you win that game with this type of team? The offense is going to be the big question. And if they're able to do that, they get to the conference championship game. I guarantee you that that is going to be a very nerve-wracking experience for the team that they face, depending on who that is. Going to the Sun Belt, Troy. Troy has surprised everybody. They're bowl eligible already at 6-3, and they're 4-1 in the Sun Belt West. Southern Miss currently sits at the top of that division, but this is a team that has surprised people a lot so far this year. Now, in terms of making a run, they have Old Dominion next, they have Georgia State after that, and then they do have Southern Miss. So they do have the ability to potentially make a run. Now, they lost to Arkansas State, who is also tied with them, so they need the Red Wolves to lose again in conference play. That is going to be a challenge that they have to go through, but Arkansas State also has to play Southern Miss. They have to play Louisiana and App State. I would say that their schedule is a little bit more difficult than Troy's, but it's still going to be difficult either way. That's going to be an interesting race to watch. Southern Miss, again, is just, to me, head and shoulders above a lot of teams in the Sun Belt right now, besides James Madison, but that is going to be a fun race to watch as well. Those are my sleeper teams in every conference. Let me know who yours are below as well. That's going to be something to pay attention to going forward.